Perfect. Welcome to Wednesday, June 14th call. Great to have you all here. Yesterday, we started a little bit talking about the Hoffman process, which is a specific book by Tim Lawrence. And I believe I messaged all of you just some photos of pages. If you didn't get it, I texted some people, I messengered other people. So you should have that. Before we start, though, this is a great explanation I want to share with you on how quantum physics works with us in order to manifest and create. Excuse me. And so, let me see. So I want to share some information about like the quantum field. Sherry, you didn't get it? Okay, I think it's in Messenger. Hang on, just go through. Yeah, it's in Messenger. So yeah, check that. And if it didn't go through, it says it's sent. Oh, there you go. Okay, awesome. So I want to talk about the quantum field of infinite potential, first of all. So the quantum field. So this is more like based in science, the science aspect of manifesting and creating. And so right now, as we are here and we're sitting, we're sitting in a basically in the middle of the field of information that contains every single potential for all reality. So everything that we want to create and manifest is out in the quantum field. It's an energy, because you can't create nor destroy energy. The quantum field is the same thing. So every possibility that's out there for every single human species is out in the quantum field. It's pure potential. It contains all of the what's referred to as the energetic building blocks that make up any situation, opportunity, or thing we can dream of, and way more. Our human brain can only imagine a very small portion of the potentials of the availability in the cosmos. And that potentiality is limited to our programming, to our conditioning that we've had as children. The field of information is full of what's referred to as quantum particles that move at the speed of light. And those are called photons, and even faster than the speed of light. So the quantum particles move at the speed of light. So there's photons that move at the speed of light, and even faster than the speed of light is something called tachyons. So when quantum physics first tried to explain and measure quantum particles, they discovered that they could either measure the movement of a particle or a location of a particle, but never both at the same time. As soon as the scientist has an expectation about where the quantum particle could be located, the particle dropped out of movement into material form. So there's scientific evidence that we can take a formless substance from the quantum field and create it into a form by our mind. So that's how that's the science behind how we create and manifest. So, but the quantum particles only represent potential. So there's a whole process that goes through before they're manifested. So at the time of this moving particle, they're not quite manifest. Once they have been located, they drop out of movement into existence. And so what meaning we give the things that we're looking for have such an influence on this, and this is why. So along with the quantum field, we have something that's called the conditioning field. And the conditioning field is the field of information surrounding you that contains the entire story of who you are and all the things that have ever happened to you. So we have quantum field, and then we have what's called a conditioning field. This field of information will include your past experiences, your emotions, your beliefs related to all of your experiences. So your conditioning field, right? This is where we have the conditioning. It also includes memories that are stored in your body, because we store everything in our body including memories from our ancestral lineage. So not only have you stored things in your body from your lifetime, and depending on your belief system, other lifetimes, but also from your ancestral lineage. And so if you're following anything in human design, your unique energy blueprint is also part of your conditioning field, right? So we're like, come to earth with a ways and means of how we're supposed to show up. So conditioning isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, if we look at it as this is kind of part of who we are. And so when we live in this field of information that contains infinite potential, so the quantum field contains infinite potential, if we even were able to tap into like the enormity of that, it would be extremely overwhelming, because we literally have unlimited choices for everything that you can create. So our human body and mind can't process that much information. So our conditioning field, so our human, right, the quantum human design, our experiences, our ancestral lineage is a filter. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, but it's acting as a filter. It will help you choose which possibilities you're going to basically create or manifest out of the quantum field. Your personal narrative, like the story you tell yourself and the world, is built from this conditioning field, and it will set a tone. Along with the quantum field and your conditioning field, you have what's called a subtle body. So the subtle body is often known as your aura. It's the natural energy field that surrounds your body. There is, and I can't remember the name of the machine, but there's tons of software out there, tons of technology that can actually measure your aura. And so it'll read it. So your aura can be different colors. You can have holes in your aura. You can have like dark entities, attached to your auric field. You can have, like I said, you could have holes. People who are on their last, or who are actually dying, facing death, don't have an auric field, right? So, and you can sense it. If you can train yourself to actually see the colors of an auric field, or even see just the energy of an auric field. But this energy field is a template that holds your energetic structure for what you're experiencing in your life right now. So if you've ever done things like energy healing or biofeedback machines, or done essential oils or homeopathy, that works on what's referred to as the subtle body level, right? So with the subtle body, in order to create change, you first have to start with changing the stories you hold in your conditioning field. And then you have to rethink and rewrite the narrative, the events of your past, and reclaim what in my world we call sovereignty over the events that led to your current story. Meaning, you have no meaning to them. It's an isness. You look at your past life, even current situations, and it becomes the isness of the thing. So even though interchange can be instant, because we can instantly release like an old belief, or at least the foundation of old belief, it sometimes will take time for your auric body, this astral body, to catch up with the changes, especially if this has been part of your story that helps you feel safe. So when we start to change our story, one of my mentors says, yeah, you're vulnerable because you've disrupted your old story and you can't go back, and how things used to be, even though it's tempting. And it's common as we start to build this new story, feeling out of sorts, because you're in between like the old you and the new you. And sometimes when you're in that between the old you and the new you, previous stories pop back into your reality. So I've explained it in the past where once you make a decision to change, all the reasons to not change show up, right? So it could be you get hit with an unexpected bill, you get hit with unexpected news. You might hang out with old friends might come back into surface and want to hang out with you. Old boyfriends come back. It could be anything, right? Something that you gave up, a new shiny, bright, shiny object might come forward for you, like right in business. And for some people, it can feel like a test or a lesson. So that's what people say, well, I'm being tested, or this is a lesson. And this is the time when lots of people give up and they stop trying to create something different. And so what can happen is that you can actually bolster some of the changes by adding subtle body therapies. And so I would say what we're doing today, I would define over the next couple of days as the Hoffman process and working the shadow self is this. It's like a subtle body therapy, right? Because it can strengthen our news story and hold it into place as we integrate it. But in order to strengthen a new story, we need to take a radical honesty of the isness of our experiences right now. So for me, it's less about what happened in our past, but understanding the story that you're holding on to, or the meaning that you're giving something in your past, in order for you to create and manifest and decondition. So the last component of manifesting is experiencing your creative intention and your story that changes on the material plane. And so your physical reality is an excellent and elegant feedback loop that mirrors back to you the changes you've made in your story and your energy field, but also mirrors back to you where you haven't made changes, where you're still holding on to your past story, your conditioning. So there's no reason to feel like you're not doing a good job, or that you've fucked this up. That's why I say all the time, you can't actually fuck this up. So there's really no mistakes to be made. It's just a feedback loop, right? And the feedback loop is telling you there's more work here. Spend more time in this story. Spend more time in this, because your physical reality, our creations, are malleable and infinite. They're never set in stone. This is why we say we're such powerful beings. We can create and manifest anything that we want. The only limitation we have are our limitations, right? Are our stories that we tell ourselves, our conditioning, our beliefs, our values, and our actions. So part of what we're going to do then with the Hoffman process, right, is to take a look at some of the stories, some of the roles that we play, right? And so I sent, I think, all of you a picture, either through Messenger and or text, of what I wanted to share with you today. And so let me find that. So we talked about patterns yesterday, and for now, I mean, I guess process this however is best for you. I would recommend, though, that at some point in time today, you actually write down or check mark, printed this off or whatever, however you need to do this, but write down your patterns, right? And so, and I think I sent it to you via Messenger. So we have different patterns. We have love patterns. So I want you to consider some of these patterns for you. Do you have a fear of intimacy? Do you have neediness? And these are defined by you. Withdrawn, dependent, abandoning. So which one of those patterns belong to you in love? In work, are you a workaholic, or do you feel trapped? In sex, do you believe that sex is bad or dirty? Do you have a fear of performance? Are you cold, or do you shut down? Do you believe that you don't deserve pleasure? Are you sexually provocative or seductive? Now, you don't have to have these patterns all of the time. Some of them you might, they might show up depending on who you're with, and that's in all patterns, not just in the sex patterns. Image patterns. Do you believe that appearance is everything? Do you have this need to be or feel special? Do you have to be the boss? Do you have a fear of success, a fear of failure? Are you self-obsessed, status conscious, and do you compare yourself to others? In money patterns, do you have a fear of poverty? Do you have to spend money to feel okay? Do you manipulate people through money? Do you believe that money is everything? Do you believe that money is the root of all evil? In your power patterns, do you have to have your own way? Are you manipulative? Do you consciously try to be intimidating? Are you submissive? Do you play victim? Respondent patterns. Are you indecisive? Do you not have any goals? Do you avoid commitment? Do you act helpless? Invalidation patterns. Are you a perfectionist? Are you critical? Are you a nitpicker? Are you apathetic? And then next, look at how your patterns can dominate your emotional states. Fear patterns. Do you fear that the worst will happen? Do you fear being abandoned? Fear of engulfment? Fear of change? Fear of confrontation? And then anger patterns. Do you lose your temper easily? Are you revengeful? Are you argumentative? Are you sarcastic? Do you lash out physically or verbally? And so the intention here, of course, is to not feel bad, but to actually own some of them without feeling bad about yourself, to learn to take responsibility for them while not beating yourself up, right? And so once we're aware of this, there's the exercises that we can do in order to move through some of these patterns. If you don't know, and so I apologize if I shared this last week, things are kind of like in my timelines are all like smushed together. I know I talked about this at the summit that I did in the second and third, but with the first time I did this exercise, I wasn't sure of all my patterns. And so I had a really candid conversation with my ex-husband, with Rob, and with my kids. And I asked them to give me some feedback on how I showed up in relationship with them. And I sent them this, right, pictures of this, and said, this is what I'm looking, this is what I'm looking for. All three of them, Mackenzie didn't do this, but all three men in my life asked me if I was sure, that if I really, really wanted to hear the feedback. And actually Darcy, my ex-husband, said, so his first response was, not in your life. Will I give you, will I share this with you? And so, right. And so we text more than call. So I, asked him if I could call him. And so I said to him, I promise you there'll be no right repercussions. There'll be no consequences for sharing with me how I showed up in my relationship with you. Jacob said to me, he was like, I don't know if I really want to participate. And so I said, why? And so he said, Mom, when you get mad, he said, you are very cold. And I don't want to be at the brunt of your cold. You're cold. And I was like, oh, no, I really need to hear this, right? And Rob's response to me was like, I'm not sure you want this, but I'll be happy to share with you. Right? He was brutally honest. And so, I don't know why I said brutally honest. It felt really honest. And that's what I was looking for, was this feedback. Mackenzie, she was like, yeah, absolutely, I can do that, right? She knew. So out of all of them, her and Rob both knew that there would be no consequences because I was asking for the feedback, I was open for the feedback. So if you're going to do that, you want to do that with someone that you trust, that would be honest with you, right? And that's what I was looking at. I didn't ask any of my friends, right? I felt at that time the friends that I had probably would have been like, not necessarily would have been felt comfortable being, that radically honest with me, number one. And number two, I realized that I show up differently in friendship than I do in my personal relationships. And so I knew if anyone was going to be able to offer me a feedback that would be useful for me, would be those. And it's very enlightening. And I said, I think we can all be all of these at any point in time, but you really want to think about the ones that you're currently experiencing, or maybe that you've experienced. Oh, excuse me. Shift and move some energy. Pardon me. And so whether you experience them when you were a child or in adulthood, and again, it's really about owning it, so that we can do this this next part. So I also sent you a photo of the task for the day, right? And I'll just answer this question first. So the feedback differ. Oh, you know what? That's a great question. So Anne asked, how did the feedback differ? And so it was really interesting because, and even in Jacob saying that I'm really cold, I wouldn't have said I was cold, right, in my response. So that was different. The other one that came up was that I'm critical, and I didn't think I was critical of myself. Like I'm right, a perfectionist and critical of myself. But I think it was Rob who said that I was critical. That didn't come from Darcy. Darcy said, "Isn't it funny that I remember this?" I can't remember shit about yesterday, but I can tell you what people said about me. So it was in the power patterns that I have to have my own way, which I knew but the manipulative, that's when the manipulative came up, right? That was the first time that I've been called manipulative and could own that. I knew I had to have my own way, but the funny thing about that, I always looked at that from the higher vibe of resourcefulness and resilience. But I don't take no for an answer, right? And so I wasn't able to, until that point in time, to look at the shadow of what that actually means. If I have to always have my own way. Rob's feedback was, and it wasn't, I don't think it was in here, but I always have to have the last word. That I just can't let things go. And I'm very cutting, very critical, and very sarcastic, and very, I don't think he called me evil, but it was like, it was really good feedback, right? And now when I enter into that, then I'm like, okay, that's the shadow. And the shadow self arises from when we talked about the patterns that kind of run our lives. It comes from that. So our shadow self comes from our core wounds and core fears, but comes from also these patterns that run our lives, which we talked about yesterday, right? And so I'll talk about the task for the day in a moment. And then in the other pieces that I sent you today was patterns become roles in our life, right? So we look at the patterns and then we look at the roles. So which are your roles that you play, and often you play more than one role. So there's the princess, the rebel, the black sheep, the special one, the slob, the fighter, the perfect one, the damaged one, the sensitive one, the genius, the peacemaker, the star, the baby, the hero, the victim, the sufferer, the dreamer, the loser, the scapegoat, the burden, the sick one, the needy one, the troublemaker, the complainer, the misfit, the successful one, the failure, the angry one, the rescuer, the wild one, the disappointment one, the teacher, the spoiled one, the invisible one, or the goody-goody. And so what happens is we have these patterns. They turn into, right, these roles. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the role will disappear, but what we become aware of the role, and then when is it beneficial to you? And then when is it not? So when are you in the shadow self of the role? So as an example, I'm a rebel, right? That's a role that I had. And so that can be beneficial when someone tells me that I don't have what it takes to do what needs to be done, right? Or that's never been done that way. So because it's never been done that way, it can't be done. The rebel in me comes out, and she's kind of like, oh, really? Okay, watch this, right? So she'll come out. But the shadow self of the rebel is I know that these are the rules, but they don't apply to me, right? There's rules in place for everybody else in the world, but they don't apply to me. And the first time that actually came up for me was, we were watching Mackenzie. We'd be watching Mackenzie. I was watching Mackenzie play basketball or something. So she was in junior high. No, she was in junior high. And so we go into her school, and I'm walking in with a friend of mine. And in the school, it says, please take off your shoes to go into the gym. And so I had a cloth with me, and I wiped off my shoes and made sure that they were dry, because it was wintertime, made sure they were dry. And I walked in and walked in to the hallway. My girlfriend, who took her shoes off, she says, Ranchella has a sign that says to take your shoes off. And I said, yeah, I know. And she was going to take her shoes off. I'm like, no, I don't. But there's a sign. I'm like, I know. I dried my shoes. And she said, but there's a sign. I'm like, I know, but I dried my shoes. And then I started to laugh. And she said, it's fascinating to me that you go through life thinking the rules apply to everybody else, but not you. And I'm like, I know, right? And then she's like, I'm not giving you a compliment. I'm like, I know. And it doesn't matter what you think, right? So it's like, you can have your opinion of me, right? But it was true. It's like, yeah, you're right. The rules don't apply to me. Right. So, and there's consequences to that. The cool thing, I don't know if it's cool or not, is I'm willing to face the consequences. I don't get offended, right? So I went in there, and someone said, you have to take your boots off. And I said, well, they're clean, actually. I have a cloth and I clean them. Do I still need to take them off? Yes, you do. Okay, cool. Right. So I'm not offended when someone asks me to follow the rules, but I tend not to follow the rules in place. Now that can work to my advantage, or it could not work to my advantage. So we can take a look at all of the roles that we play, and look at when is it advantageous to have that role, and when isn't it? Like the rescuer, when I'm the rescuer, Rob and I rescued a little bird, fell out of the tree yesterday. That was a good, right? But if I'm trying to rescue another human being who's A, not looking for assistance, right? Or B, I sacrifice my own personal well-being to be the rescuer, to be like the hero. That's part of the rescuer role, is the hero role. Dun, 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 look at me. I can solve the world's problems, and I'm sacrificing my own health and wellness. That's the shadow side. So when you really understand how of this conditioning affects you. So that goes back to what I shared earlier about the quantum field and our subtle energy bodies. Once we understand these key pieces, the patterns and the roles, it makes it easier for us to rewrite the story. We can rewrite the story. And in fact, you can go into your past if you feel called to, and have a conversation with the child in you, and you can rewrite a new story. You can rewrite a new story. And what do I mean by that? You can actually imagine a time in your life where it didn't go your way. I'll just use that word. It was painful. And you can rewrite the story. And then when rewriting that story, the energy, right? The frequency that you emit will be different. And it kind of goes back to something we talked about in the coaching certification program yesterday, and things that I've mentioned here before is that your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. So through visualization and imagination, you can create your life because you're writing a story. There was a study that was done in Harvard with pianists. There was a group of piano players that played the piano, and they had equipment on their head, and a certain part of their brain lit up. And there was people who imagined playing the piano, and the same area in their brain lit up. So whether we look at this from a scientific perspective or we look at it from a spiritual perspective, we are super, uber powerful beings who can create and manifest anything. So back to the story of you can go back into your past, you can change the outcome. You can reimagine a different outcome. And this is so fantastic if you've had any trauma, right? So I'm going to spend just a couple more minutes. So for those of you who have to go, I get it. When I was 6 years old, I ran away from home. And I won't get into all the details of the story, but my dad came to, I ran away from home. I told my mom where I was going. Right? And so my dad came to pick me up, and he was really angry. And my dad, I've inherited my incredibly awesome wicked temper from my dad. And he told me to come home, and I was actually afraid of my dad. And he said it would be fine. And I remember saying to him, I don't want a spanking. And he's like, I won't spank you. You just need to come home. But when I got home, I got a spanking. And it was the last time I ever got a spanking. And it was with a belt. So I remember this as if it happened yesterday. He took off his belt, asked me to pull down my pants. So there's a whole bunch of humiliation that can go into that. And he gave me a spanking. Afterwards, and I heard this when I was older, he went and barfed. He was so sick to his stomach because he realized the mistake that he had made. And so that started a long, in my past, that had started a long narrative of my experiences with men. They can't be trusted. People say one thing and they don't really mean it. There's consequences. It's like a whole really influential moment in my life. So when I started to do trauma work, I went back into that as the young child, and I had a conversation with my dad, right, at that time. And the conversation, kind of went, and I had a deeper understanding of my father at that time. And my father didn't participate in the conversation, right? So when I went back into this, part of what happened was I ran away to my dad's business partner's place. They were our surrogate godparents. And my dad was humiliated and embarrassed. Here I am running away, showing them that that my mom and dad aren't the perfect parents. My mom and dad did everything in their power to keep up the appearances of being successful business owners, successful people, right? Successful parents. And they were really struggling as being parents. My mom and dad were really shitty parents. I mean, they did the best that they could with what they had, but they really weren't great parents. My dad his drinking was really heavy at the time. My mom was trying to control that. So through this conversation that I had in my head, right, in this young Rachel, at that time, everyone called me Randy. So this young Randy has this conversation with her dad. And in the end, after the spanking, what I created in my head was my dad started to cry right then and got on his knees and told me he was really sorry and he made this horrible mistake and that he can be trusted, that he will make mistakes, but that I can trust him for what he says. And then he apologized for not keeping his word. So I was able to heal that part. And I ran that news story for probably a couple of weeks every day to reprogram, to deprogrammed what I had, right? That came from doing this work, from doing this Hoffman process, because I started to see how the roles and rules and the patterns come up. Now, I would recommend that you keep this kind of in your back pocket and do the shadow work on a regular basis, because every time we up level, a new part of the shadow or another part of the shadow is going to appear, because we're unlocking, right? We're unlocking our conditioning, and we'll have new memories that will come up. The other thing that's so great about this is that you start to see that every experience that you have is about perception, right? Every experience that you have is about perception. And what do I mean by that? I was on the phone. I'll give you, this is a perfect example. This came up today, which is, of course, brilliant. There's no such thing as coincidences. I was on the phone earlier this morning with someone, and she was really, really angry with me. And she was angry with me because there was an interaction that happened, and I didn't defend her publicly. And she felt that because I didn't defend her publicly, that I'm not a good friend. And that for her definition of a good friend is when you see someone saying something that you should defend somebody. Now, the story, without getting into detail, it was kind of all, it was in a business setting. And when I show up as a friend, I actually don't defend anyone publicly. If I see someone being, behaving in a way that doesn't feel supportive, I have a private conversation. I don't do it publicly. Oh, the reason why I don't do it publicly is my own reason, meaning I have a story behind it. I don't want to publicly humiliate somebody. So I'll have a private conversation. Everyone kind of following the story? So my role and the rules that I have, my pattern of behavior is X. This person was looking for Y. In her mind, the definition she gave my behavior is that I suck as a friend. In my mind, the definition of what I was doing was I was defending my friend to my other friend through a private conversation, because in my head, it doesn't need to be public, nor should it be public. Who's right? No one. Neither one of us is right. Both of us came into the relationship, into the conversation with our conditioning in place, right? Both of us came into the conversation with our conditioning in place. So that's why there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's an interpretation of the information based on our past experiences. So the interpretation of the information based on my experience had me think and feel this way, right? You're both coming from our own story. Exactly, Sherry. So this is what's fascinating about the human experience is that we have the opportunity to not take things personal. We have the opportunity to know that we have our own story and know that everyone else has their own story. And no one's doing anything to us. People are doing everything for us, right? This woman was totally pissed off with me this morning. She was ready to cut me out of her life. And that would have been really sad, and I would have been really hurt, and it would have been okay. Because she's coming from that place, right? And I understood. And so we can show up as our full selves, right? Especially when we understand our shadow self. So part of what the exercise for today is, and I sent this to you as well, so if you can see the page, it's page 27, your task for the day, right? So is, what things about yourself would you most like to change? Is it your impatience or procrastination, your inability to finish a task, Is it that you've lost faith in yourself or in your partner? Is it that you don't feel able to experience many emotions, or that you're a workaholic? Look back at the list of patterns on pages 23 and 24 if you need some ideas. The task for today is be aware of the patterns in your life. Do you feel that they take over, right? My anger patterns take over, right? So if there's any shadow pieces that I have the opportunity to work on today, would be my anger. And my anger only really happens in my love partnerships, right? I don't experience anger anywhere else except with my partners, right? So we can take a look at these patterns. What's taking over? Spend some time with it. Observe their effect, and do this until it says in here, do this until you've convinced yourself that you're worth dumping. I don't know if you need to convince yourself, but look at it and go, is this something I want to work on, right? Is this something that I'm willing to let go? Keep the feelings of frustration inside you for now. Now, what my interpretation of that is, you don't need to go and have a conversation with anybody about it right away. Just to contemplate, where are you in this process? Just make note of it. So whether or not you do want to voice memo it, or journal it, or like, I don't know, on your computer, whatever that looks like for you. But just spend some time in today. Actually, I'll say for the rest of the week, we're going to work through some of this in the next, like over the next week, like this week. We're going to kind of go through some of these exercises together. There'll be a little bit of homework. You can choose to do it or not. The growth really is, especially with our groundhog days. So if you weren't sure where to start, I can hear someone feeling that. I don't know where to start. Where you can start is with your groundhog days, the experiences that you have over and over again that keep on coming up for you. There's a shadow, there's a pattern you have there, there's a role that you're playing there, there's some shadow stuff there. And so we can start deconditioning that part through understanding the shadow piece. So, all right, thank you so much, everyone, for staying a little bit longer today. I so much appreciate you, appreciate that. Have an incredible day. Big hugs and kisses to all of you. And I shall see some of you later on for the certification training, and I'll see everyone else tomorrow. Bye. Love you.